NPR is being forced to defend itself and its journalism after a senior business editor at the company, Uri Berliner, published an article blasting the outlet for being biased. His piece in the Free Press is titled, "I've been at NPR for 25 years. Here's how we lost America's trust." He exposes how NPR intentionally chose to cover Trump negatively and cherry-picked which stories they would pursue.
I think after a while we started covering Trump in a way that like a lot of legacy news organizations, that we were trying to damage his presidency, to even find anything we could to harm him. And I think what we latched on to was Russia collusion, like a lot of news organizations, which was, as I write, sort of catnip, although it was just rumors and a lot of it based on pretty shoddy documents. We really latched on to Adam Schiff. He was like our muse to the Trump collusion story. We had him on constantly. And then the Mueller report came out and no collusion. And, I think we sort of learned to the story kind of disappeared.
Well, these are all things that we knew if you had your eyes open, but that is very powerful coming from someone who was an editor at NPR. He added that an open-minded spirit no longer exists at the company, calling out the lack of diversity within the voter registration of the journalist.
At one point, I got so frustrated with what I saw was the lack of different perspectives in our coverage that I decided to look at voter registration, among our staff. And what I found was 87 registered Democrats on our editorial staff, 0 Republicans. I presented this at a all hands or a large news meeting, and I said, "Hey, look, something's gone wrong here."
0 Republicans, 0. Think about that. But NPR's editor-in-chief brushed off the allegations, writing in an internal memo, "I and my colleagues on the leadership team strongly disagree. We're proud to stand behind the exceptional work that our desk and shows do to cover a wide range of challenging stories. We believe that inclusion among our staff with our sourcing and in our overall coverage is crucial to telling the nuanced stories of this country and our world." Harris, we see this time and time again, and I applaud Uri for coming forward with what he saw.
Yes.
This isn't the first time we've heard this from a main outlet.
No, and, considering the fact that we're in an election season for president, my focus is really on those voters of all stripes, but particularly Democrats who are listening and getting most of their news from National Public Radio. What are they being led to believe? Well, one thing is true. Apparently, whoever is putting out the content for NPR is not interested in debate. So you don't know if you're getting a real pool of contested, greatly debated, factual information, because it's all coming from the same think tank. It's all coming from the same people who think alike, probably have the same value system. And look, if you're going to church, that's one thing, but NPR is not supposed to be a church. It's not supposed to be a worship hall. It's supposed to be where all ideas are debated, where all facts are collected and presented. So I worry about those Democrat voters. There may be a reason why some of them see things the way they do, because their pool of information is polluted and not, they haven't sifted out the stuff that's not true.
Very much so. Kara, this was eye-opening in his piece. He said the laptop, talking about the Hunter Biden laptop, was newsworthy, but the timeless journalistic instinct of following a hot story lead was being squelched. Listen to this part. "During a meeting with colleagues, I listened as one of NPR's best and most fair-minded journalists said it was good we weren't following the laptop story because it could help Trump." These are journalists.
I can't. And this is the problem with an ideological monopoly on the information environment. And that is what we saw, by and large, in the 2020 election with big tech, with media for the most part, with the exception of networks like this one. You look at what was happening on Twitter. Remember the links to the New York Post stories? They were blocked from people DMing
right
them.
Here.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's what happens when they have that ideological monopoly. I'll say it again, on the information environment. You look at diversity and inclusion when it comes to melanin levels in your skin, but not when it comes to how you think. And that is hugely problematic for Americans making their own decisions with all of the information at hand.
Juan Williams, who used to work at NPR, I want you to take a listen to his assessment of the story. It's fascinating.
Not only did they fire me, they called me a psycho. I mean, they said horrible things about me quite publicly. So, no, it doesn't surprise me what he had to say. In fact, I think, and This, of course, was before Trump, Laura. So they are very much an insulated cadre of people who think they're right. And they have a hard time with people who are different. So even for me, and I don't think I'm any wild-eyed conservative, but they thought I was too conservative a black guy for their kind of company.
I think Juan raises a crucial point. I think you raise that crucial point. All Juan and Berliner want are divergence of opinion on their air. Berliner is not one of these guys that's going to be attending CPAC next year, all right? He's a hardcore liberal. All he's asking for, though, is divergent points of view on his air so that the NPR listener can get that. Instead, what you have, don't let their smooth, docile tones on NPR fool you. They are a hardcore, ruthless, far-left propaganda machine. But, guys, the difference is when MSNBC does it, they're allowed to do that. Why? Because they're not funded by the taxpayer. NPR is funded by your taxpayer dollars. You are paying for that. So NPR should represent a cross-section of the taxpayers out there. 87-0 does not represent a cross-section.
I love that you said don't let the smooth, docile tone mislead you, because it is kind of like sleep-inducing. But Emily, I mentioned this has happened at other outlets. James Bennett, the New York Times opinion editor, we don't have time to put it up, but he wrote an article for The Economist when the New York Times lost its way. And he talked about how they put trigger warnings or advocated for trigger warnings on conservative pieces. Imagine what we don't know. You have some courageous journalists who have spoken up, but what don't we know?
Right. I'm so struck by this because the truth coming out will no doubt be totally squashed by the same machine that has perpetuated it. And the NPR that we grew up with, right, we remember, and Uri talked about this, that back in 2011, a good quarter were conservatives of their listenership. A good quarter were middle of the road. 37% were liberal. It really did reflect a diversity of ideological thought and what America looked like. He said, nothing made us prouder than hearing that a farmer on his tractor at sunrise was listening to Morning Edition, and that wasn't rare. Cut to 2023, when we have, as they said, the muse of Russia, that collusion nonsense was Adam Schiff. Well, Schiff was interviewed 25 times. He became their guiding light. He became the true north of what then was not only printed by them, but then imprinted by everyone else. But Schiff was censured by the United States House for those comments and his lies. And that is yet what still remained and has been maintained as that bastion, that guiding light for the coverage. So how far we have fallen, how much it breaks my heart. And it's all because of their reaction to President Trump. And I just fear that we will never get back to anything that even remotely reflects that other than here, where our views are safe and protected, no matter how different they are.
Yep, and there's great incentive. You win Pulitzers if you peddled Russian collusion. So that's State of Journalism today.
I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
It's not about justice. It's not about agenda. It's not about mobilizing people. It's about dialing for corporate dollars. These two parties have sold the U.S. government and the American people to the highest bidders.